I want to find out. This is part of freedom of speech, but I want to find out if there is anything that would be illegal to have written. So if somebody published a book, and let's just say they had their own printing press and put together a book and handed it out to people, if the book was something like best way to hide a dead body or best way to get away with kidnapping children, is there anything that could be written down that should be illegal? And let's start with Jerem. Unless you want to ponder and then have me start somewhere else.
I think Jerome's answer is gonna be anything advocating deontology that should be outlawed.
Yeah, true.
But serious answer:
So,
is there anything that should be legally outlawed in our society as far as writing?
I don't know. The
Okay.
battle going on is that like um so this gets into like freedom of speech, and freedom of speech generally like has positive utility, but I'm wondering if eventually uh there should be some regulation, just for the sake of, increasing well-being. And I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
Okay. Lewis, what about you? Any thoughts on that one?
Before I give my answer, let me ask: am I coming in clear to all of you?
I can hear you. There's a little static.
Distorted. I hear a lot of audio artifacts that makes it difficult to understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm getting the same thing on my end with all of you guys, and I'm not sure. I guess I have no idea why that's happening, but it's pretty significant. It's
Okay.
like a lot of crackling.
Okay, so Phil, thoughts on is there any writing that should be illegal?
This is a really difficult one because obviously, when it comes to meta freedoms, the freedoms that help us protect other freedoms, the freedoms that allow us just the utility in society. That's a good way of putting it. That allows us to know when something in society is going wrong. The most important thing we have is free speech. Um, and the some of the very most controversial things that are said and would be banned are those things that need to be said the most. So it's very difficult. You don't need to know how to bury a body. You don't need to know how to kidnap a child or whatever else. But when you challenge real power, and I don't mean that in a in necessarily the way that it's always there's certain people who say, oh, well, challenging power. No, the way you're challenging real power is that people will try to their best to silence you, and if they succeed, that means they really were powerful. So that's why freedom of speech is so important. And I don't have an easy answer. I think that there are so many negative consequences to having anything other than if you can prove in a court of law that you're actually calling for someone to be killed. um for what's the example of the guy who did that, those famous murders, he drew a swastika on his head.
Yeah, Manson.
Manson didn't kill anyone himself. He just sent his minions out to kill people. That kind of speech is still killing. It's still participating in murder. When you're the boss who sends everybody else out. So that kind of speech is not allowed. But I struggle to find a way to otherwise regulate speech in a way that's not also going to end up simply being abused and having us live in a system that's worse off than if we just left speech completely alone. So I don't know. I'm open to my mind being changed on this because it's a really hard issue, but I think that fairly close to free speech absolutism probably has the most utility.
Okay. Travis?
Well, I actually have a question to Phil. When he says that like he favors criminalizing calling for people to be killed, like when you say that, are you kind of talking about you talking about like directly like ordering like people to kill, like if I say like, oh, like you guys should go kill X, are you talking about that, or are you talking about like simply voicing a view that X should be killed? Because my understanding is like the latter, that's actually not considered illegal currently, at
Yeah.
least in the US.
No, I mean, if you're ordering a kill, yeah. Like
Okay.
if you're saying, if you're giving an order and you expect it to be obeyed, not if you're simply, it's not, because there are people out there who are trying to say, if you're just virulently enough criticizing someone, then you're demonizing them, and you don't even have to say they should be killed. You're just demonizing them enough. That's hate speech, and that leads to violence. Therefore, you're guilty of something. I don't agree with that at all, and I don't agree that simply saying so and so deserves to die, that should not be illegal. Nor should be saying like, if so and so, it should be illegal, and you should be executed if you don't paint your door green. That person also has the right to say that people who don't paint their door green should be executed. What matters is, are you giving an order of some kind?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that bit. As for like my view on it, I guess I maybe have somewhat of a controversial opinion because I actually don't, at least for certain groups of people, I don't intrinsically value their like right to express themselves. Like, I don't intrinsically value the free speech of Nazis, for example. I don't see any principled problem with suppressing and like censoring hate speech. I guess my problem would just be like the practical consequences of enforcing that into law. Like, how do you determine what is hate speech and what is not? So I think just for practical purposes, I would oppose at least hate speech laws.
Gotcha. Okay. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Phil with regards to basically saying, because obviously a little bit how it is now with free speech in general, where we basically understand that, your free speech is absolute unless it's connected to something else that's actually a crime, like ordering a kill, threatening a kill, attempting a kill, something, or like defrauding somebody or something like that. So if I write you, so all of these things, but it's not then. It's not so much the speech that's illegal, it's the crime, and the speech is just part of the evidence of that crime, or part of how you're committing that crime, if you know what I'm saying. So like, it's illegal to kill somebody, and that includes whether you get somebody else to do it or whether you do it yourself. And obviously the getting somebody else to do it's going to involve some kind of speech, whether you write them a letter or whether you tell them verbally or whatever. So for me, free speech is basically absolute, outside of when it's criminal for some other reason, because it's actually part of something else that's criminal, like killing somebody or defrauding them or something like that.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple questions to see how far we can stretch this, and anybody can hop in to answer the question. So, assuming that we can all agree that if somebody says to somebody else, I want you to go kill this person, if they do so, then that speech is not allowed. But if somebody, say, had a public forum that they could tell their audience, I think all Asian people should be killed. And then that's all that said, just those words. I think they should all be killed. And then somebody from their audience goes and kills an Asian person and says, oh, but this person that I thought was the Messiah of whatever said they think they should all be killed. Is there any criminal act that happened by the person saying, I think all Asians should be killed?
Is that for me to?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't think they've committed a crime as much as they've gotten as close to it as they possibly can. But no, they're expressing an opinion, which isn't, that should be protected speech. Yeah.
Okay. And then if somebody, let's say somebody writes a book where they're detailing how to kidnap children. If I were to kidnap a child, it'd probably be from the way they did it in the Changeling, where you get another child to be on your team, and then they go get kids to hop in the car. So if you wrote a book saying this is the best way to get a kid to get in your car, and then somebody has that book and they go kidnap a child, and when they're asked, they say, "Oh, I wouldn't have thought of it, but I read this book and then I went and did it." Would the writer of that book would you say that book should be banned, or that
No.
the writer of that book is held responsible? Okay.
No.
I agree with both things you've said so far. Does anybody else disagree?
I do want to ask if everyone agrees with if I add some nuance to the first one you gave. So let's say he said, "I think all blank people should be killed." Um, it's okay if that ends up in court and they try to convict him of it, but maybe it turns out that he didn't really. That's not really an order. But then the prosecution says, "Well, look, here in your sermon, you said what I think should happen is the law because I'm the prophet, I'm God on earth." There's a that should end up in court. Whether or not it should end up in a conviction, I don't know. That's an edge case.
Gotcha.
Carson, in
Yeah.
regards to that first example about the person who says, like, I think all Asians should be killed, I wouldn't have any problem in principle with outlawing that speech. It's just like the practical. I'm worried about like downstream consequences, like how hate speech law would be enforced in practice. Maybe like you would go after. I mean, we've seen this in some other countries where they have hate speech laws. Like legitimate political speech is prosecuted under hate speech laws. So I'm kind of just worried about like the practical consequences of it. I don't,
Yeah.
in principle, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with outlawing that type of speech.
Okay. Well, one example we could go over, Matt, in your country, have I heard correctly that if right now you were to say that you don't think the Holocaust happened, that if somebody saw that footage and knew where you lived, you could be arrested for that?
I don't actually know. I'm pretty sure it's the case in Germany, and I know that the swastika is illegal in Germany. So like you can be
Okay.
arrested for having the swastika, like if you had a swastika tattoo or a flag or something. And I know that's not the case in England with the swastika. Like it's not a crime for someone to wear a swastika in England, but it is in Germany. I don't know about the Holocaust denial thing, to be honest. I don't know. Is the truth. Perhaps I should as I live there, but.
Okay, let's take that first example I had and push it a little further. Instead of saying, I think Asians should be killed, what if they just said, I wish so and so, and they said a name? They just said a name of a real human. Maybe it's a politician they don't like. I wish this person was taken out. Would it come down to the wording that when it becomes illegal is when you're saying, I want you to?
There's a famous case from England where a king, and I wish I could remember which king it was off the top of my head, but he said, like, there was this critic from the Catholic Church who would constantly actually, I don't know if it was Anglican Church or Catholic, but he would constantly criticize the king. And he says to his court, won't someone rid me of this turbulent priest? Right? And then 2 knights ride out and kill him. And that's all he said. Won't someone rid me of this turbulent priest? Like, and that's been sort of like a famous case study in common law for both the UK and the US since then. And that is the edge case. I don't know where I'd land on it, but I think that should be an edge case. And so there should be cases where you get convicted for that because you actually did intend for someone to kill him. And there should be cases where you're not convicted for it because you didn't intend for someone to kill him.
Gotcha.
Yeah, sorry. Can I just say I actually agree with that, but that's because in that situation, the authority he had over them, I think you could say that he was giving them an order, despite the fact that his wording could also be like described as just expressing an opinion. I think the overall context, I think you could establish that he is essentially giving an order because he's saying it to people who are directly under his command. So it's like it's different if a mafioso boss expressed his opinions to his paid assassin who is paid to kill people for him, that I want this person killed. He's not just expressing an opinion, he's basically giving an order, even though the words he used might be the same, that if 2 different people had that same conversation, they're just expressing an opinion. Like, I I want someone to take out President Bush because of whatever, you know what I mean, or something like that. He's just expressing opinion. He hasn't given an order with any expectation that it's going to be carried out. But if it's a king telling it his knights, or if it's a mafioso boss telling it to his paid assassins or whatever, then so it's not so much about the exact words per se, but the context of what those words are actually saying. And that's why on that, in the example you give, I agree that you could prosecute the king as being, you know, guilty of the crime, but that's not because of the words he used specifically, but because of the context surrounding. Does that make sense?